As they say in the entertainment industry, the show must go on. And what must it go on from in this case? Well, it must go on from catastrophe, because there have been a few problems with the Mac. So a couple of bits of footage have become sort of dodgy. We don't know what's going to happen to them. It could be weeks before I get to recover the footage that is supposed to be the Vidcast 50, and well, by then I'm going to forget, because I've already recorded it all, but of course I can't get at it. So I'm going to give you a really rough, quick rundown via this instead of what happened, just so that it's recorded for posterity's sake, and it will have to count as a vidcast in this case. But something crazy and big does happen, because we have player character death this session. So obviously we're going to have no fancy intros or anything like that, because it is, as I say, it's just a one-take thing, so that's all good. Alright, so the guys are at the warehouse, continuing on from number 49 of course, and they decide, well, we've got to try and get in, what about the roof? And Ashard decides to climb up. He finds these great handhold things that go up the wall that look perfect to be able to climb to the top, almost as if, you know, a lot of people would regularly be using it. Anyway, he climbs all the way to the top and gets there just fine, and while at the top he decides to start searching around for any sort of like hidden openings or anything like that on the roof, and he does find a crank, which he cranks the crank, and it opens up a big section in the roof so that he can look down into the storage warehouse, and he's like 75 feet up, so it's quite a way. And you can see right below him are 4 nets, and they're sort of tied ready to go, and the way they're set up, different sized nets, is that it looks like whoever would go up onto the roof would be able to use it as a drop point to drop goods down into the nets below, and then that's connected to a winch pulley system on the ground, so they can be winched down. So obviously when they want goods to come in sort of hot, or you know, in a stealthy manner, then obviously they can come in via that. And Ash waited there. He couldn't quite see anything yet, and Tanador goes to the door and knocks it, and the slit opens, and it's one of the mercenaries, and he says, "Oh, let us in." He said, "No, we can't now. We can't. We've been paid to stop you, so that's it." And I said, "Oh, how much have you been paid?" "Well, we've been given 10 gold each, so you know that's 30 gold now. We've been paid to guard the place. We didn't know we'd be paid additionally again, so that's a bonus. So we're now doing our job properly, and you know we obviously can't let you in." But Tanador doesn't like that, and he does the effective roll really quickly, and does this great dexterity initiative roll versus the merc, and fingers through the slits, pokes the guy right in the eye, and he's like, "Ah!" like that. And then the other guy comes to the door, and Tanador's about to poke him, and he pulls the slit shut quickly, and Tanador's knocking the door again, and now speaking in a high-pitched, effeminate voice, going on about that he's got a delivery for them. Just, you know, party are nuts, aren't they? They're crazy. Meanwhile, Ash knows something's going on there at the door. He can sort of hear it, and he's even like made a comment about it. It's like, "Why don't we pay them? Give them 11 gold each, whatever." And we joked about it that he obviously can't talk to the party because he's all the way up on the roof. So there'd be like this echoey thing going down, 11 gold, 11 gold, 11 gold, 11 gold. Just like going around, even the mercs are going to look around, so where the hell did that come from? Anyway, right, so he decides he's going to set himself up, prep himself for a quick, smart entry. So he gets his long length of rope out and ties it off. I get him to do a cunning engineering test, but I don't tell him if the test is successful. Unless you know. That's how it works with being a player in a GM campaign. I think it's better the less you know. Because you have to trust to see whether your tying engineering skills are any good or not. So he's got to trust that that role was going to be good enough for what he was going to be needing to do. So he tied it off up there and tied it around himself and hoped for the best. Yes. Now the group were deciding, we're just having to go in. That's fine then. All right. So Delilah steps forward, our monk, and she starts battering the door and running up and kicking the door, and now actions like this will normally cause a bit of sort of like damage to the person, and the way you can justify it is that it's not really damage. The jarring effects are more sort of sapping your strength, sapping your stamina. You're having to do some. I mean, you could even argue that the act of having to do like a strength might test, could take off at least 1 hit point, because obviously it takes hit points down to 0, being the point at which you then get badly hit. Possibly like what could amount to a fatal critical blow. That's the good way to look at it. All these things sap your health, and obviously computer games are really bad on players, aren't they? In that way, because everyone speaks in terms of such and such damage. But yes, I do always keep reminding my party, well, it's hit points. The point at which you get hit. And it's good to remind them of that from time to time. So anyway, Delilah's battering at the door, hurting herself, kind of, wearing herself down a bit. And then Karak decides to do a mind blast on Delilah's foot at the door. So he mind blasts her. He really overuses that spell, doesn't he? He mind blasts her foot into the door, smacks into it. The door comes down. She goes flying through it, and the trap's on the other side of the door. And it's a big spring trap thing, goes like that. But because of the momentum sent her forward, it's kind of gouged her, scraped her body, but she's not impaled through the ribs at either side. So it's up like that, and then it retracts back, and she's all like, all that tore. That's ripped my cloak, my robes. Darn it. Anyway, she's in the room now, lying on the floor, and the guys step forward a bit, and they're about to come in, and then the 3 mercs are standing in the place saying, look, okay, we're going to oppose you, and you know what's in here, alright? We know that you know that the 2 golems are in here. You don't want to face these things. Believe me, you don't want to have to fight these things and us. Okay, so how about you just turn around, walk away. That's the thing to do. The group weren't having any of that. They decided, well, okay. Costello was very much of the mind of, can't we give these gentlemen what they want? Can't we maybe give them money to walk away from this situation? And they said, yeah, possibly, but you'd have to beat what we've been paid by our boss, by the man hiring us. And the group weren't comfortable. They didn't trust the mercs, their word on that. The group were kind of split in opinion on this, but they said, all right, we'll what about actually hiring you to help us to fight the golems? And the mercs laughed, and they said, look, we know how bad those things are. You think we're fighting them? Not a chance. And then the group said, well, what would it take? And they determined that it was going to take 28 gold each merc to help them. So, like 11 gold each to have them walk away, or 28 gold each, that's 3 mercs, to have them actively assist in the fight against Click and Clack, the golems. And as it's going to turn out, Zalkima the boss. Well, after a bit of negotiation, they agree. They give them 5 gold up front, and the rest ready to give them. Karak makes this crazy communications test, and just smashes through the opposed role, and gets these load of stunts to make his argument massively convincing. So, in he goes with that, and, the group have their way. The mercs say, alright, okay, we'll assist you here. You're going to need it. So they back into the room and they point out into the darkness where the first of the golems are, and it's a horrible thing in robes. And now the way I've built this golem as part of the conversion process from the Freeport module True 20, I mean, it obviously can't come over exactly the same. Certain things have to be adapted. And one of the things that I usually try and do is come up with unique stunts for the age system that sort of convey a feeling of the golems. Now the golems are very stunt centric as creatures, and sometimes that can be dangerous. But the reason I've allowed it is because I've got a enrage mechanic in play. So I use a percentile D100 roll, and I have the golems start with an accumulated 5% rage per player character present. So they each are going into the fight, one started off first, with 25% built. So on round 1, I'd roll the dice, like that, see what we get, and obviously as each round goes by, 5% adds on per round. So then they've got a 30% chance to go mad, and then a 35% chance the round after. And the other thing is that they've got a stunt ability called Rile, so they can actively spend stunt points, and for every stunt point they spend, they can add another 5% to that roll. So they can rile themselves up with stunts. And what happens once they get this? Well, they go all nuts and they can start actually using their at half health, making attacks against the enemy that can potentially damage themselves. So basically they've got like 4 armor anyway, so that would take into account, and then anything past that, basically they can do 4 extra damage without penalty on top of all their attacks, but add as much, pretty much, to it as they want, while also taking that out of themselves as damage, within reason, of course. It's got to be GM moderated, you know, to be fair. But basically they're hitting you so hard that the flesh is sloughing off and they're cracking the bone in the arm. That's how hard they're hitting you, sort of thing. That they're destroying themselves in the bargain. So, I mean, they have that ability, but also once they enrage, they get to use their stunt die as stunts every round, regardless of doubles being rolled or not. So, I mean, that's the thing. So it's a random enrage that makes them really interesting, and then although they get really scary at that point. And, you know, they're having to do fear tests and things like that. Anyway, Delilah's first in against the action, even though the guys are like firing spells and start to take it out. And Tanador has the fragmenting skull thing that he took off Milton Drac and threw that, and that thing just blew up straight on the golem and tore a load of flesh up backwards. And I was describing this thing in terrible horror, and I was freaking Jez out with it. You know, I think it went a bit too far for his taste. He can't take a lot. But, you know, I say, look, if I don't describe these things properly to you and the effects that's going on, you're just staring at a bunch of models on a table, you know? That's no good. That's no good for you. And because it's no good for you, in turn, that's no good for me. Yeah, so, anyway, huge damage initially to this thing. And it decides to go after Delilah. And the way they work is that whoever they see first, they go for, and that's it. They want to pulp that person to complete mush until there's nothing left of them, and then move on to someone else. Great, okay? Poor Delilah. Poor Delilah's got it, and it's pound and smash. And, you know, at this point, Ash decides to jump down. So he comes down on his rope, and he's like, Tarzan, Tarzan, Tarzan! And then it turns more into George of the Jungle, because the rope test has actually failed, and it comes loose at the last minute, and he's, whoa, boom, and he falls to the floor. The rope has snapped, it couldn't hold his weight, and he's fallen too near the other golem, which has set it off. And so that one wants Ash, and it's coming after him. Oh yes. So now, both golems are active in the fight, and the group quickly try and run over to get to that one and start accommodating. They're positioning, ready to sort of... And by this time, they've put out so much damage on the first golem that he's almost done in. And he goes slowly. He dies, and just all of his insides just vomit up out and just go everywhere, and it's just nasty. All these bits explode, and there's all this acidic bile stuff just covering people, and so they have to do a constitution stamina test to see if they can shake it off, and this kind of, and they can use dexterity to try and dodge it. Anyway, Delilah was not very lucky dodging, and she starts like heaving on the spot there, and the others kind of managed to pretty much get it under control. The mercs were really putting out some great damage, by the way, on that golem. All three of them were getting in and stabbing like mothers, I tell you. They were desperate to kill this thing, you know, and get their money. And they were really frightened of it, so, you know, they're stabbing like crazy. And they were putting out some great damage, because all it was the, the Kunari warriors from set 2, you know, the Autumn Falls, the stats on them ones. I just ran them. So, anyway, it blows up. Zalkima pops up on the scene, and he decides to go for Costello, who's at the back, and he's looks like Thuron at the moment. So he attacks and does his roguey thing. He's out of nowhere, and flum, tries to go for Costello. Costello manages to shake off the crowd control ability he's trying to do to him, turns straight round, turns into a serpent form and bites him, puts him, you know, down into the initiative queue and screws him up. And at this point he's got like a smoke thing ready, and he's about to free it on his belt. It's sort of hanging from his belt, and he decides, because Karak's turned around, hit him with his lightning, and then lightning again. He's like, ow, I did not like that. You mage are going down. So he jumps over Costello's head and goes straight for Karak. They're standing pretty near, and he gets to him and tries to backstab and tries all this stuff. He can't do much to him either. So neither Karak or Costello, the two clothies, neither of them are having any of the rogue's tricks. They see him coming, they're not letting him exploit for the extra damage, he's not able to get any dirty fighting things up against them. It's going really bad for them. They're going really well on their rolls. And he didn't know what to do. You know, he's trapped between these two clothies. He can't stop either of them. Karak's just completely hammering the crap out of him, and Costello isn't too far behind in said hammering. Delilah's back into the fight, and already Tanador's over at the second golem, and they're trying to save Ash, and you know, this thing picks up Ash and throws him at Tanador, and you know, Tanador it knocks Tanador back a couple of steps, and he goes back in and stabs the thing again. You know, it feels no pain. It's just crazy. It's just crazy, and you know, even though it did enrage in the end, it wasn't enough. The group are incredible. They are incredible. And they super damaged Zalkima down, had him stunned and poisoned and all this sort of stuff, and his smoke sticks go off. Falls to the floor at last, activates, and he's got 2 smoke sticks gone off, and he's got a flash bead there, ready to blind them if need be anyway. And you know, there's a load of smoke up, and Karak fires into the smoke, hoping he's hit Zalkima. He can't tell what he's hitting. And at this point, the guys are going completely mad on the golem, and they kill that one too. Somehow. And he explodes. He explodes. Now at this point, Karak and Costello are all the way over by the door, because they were held up fighting Zalkima, and they're in the smoke sort of area still. And Delilah goes down, because the explosion of all the stuff has gone over her again. She swallowed some of it, and as ingesting it and some of the damage from her wounds, she's gone down choking. She's vomiting, and she goes into 0 health status, effectively, into a dying mode, yeah? And now here's the problem. It's Constitution +2 rounds to die in, okay? But what happened to Delilah back at the Sunken Temple? She gave her blood, didn't she? And she was -2 Constitution, which put her down to 0 Constitution. So 0 plus 2, I believe, equals 2 rounds. Uh-oh. So, a round passes, and she's choking on vomit, right? And the damage over time effect of her vomiting, penetrating damage, is still affecting her. Now, because I'm saying to the player and to the group, well, I'm not going to allow like a full-on character death as a coup de grace just from a damage over time that's still continuing on them. So we'll call it, you know, minus 0, that has to be healed back up and over healed, and that's how bad they're getting. So she's all right, you know, she's in the -4 territory at this point. Ash drops to his knees with a bandage in hand, and some smelling salts and things, and tries saving her life. It gets the healing kit out and does what he can to try and help her. And you know, it's not really his good stat, cunning, anyway, for things like that. And you know, bless him, he tried really well, and he managed to heal her for 4 HP, which brought her from -4 to 0, which is, in Dragon Age mechanics, still in dying mode. So Karak sees that, Costello sees that, and they race over to the choking on her own vomit while unconscious Delilah. And they are around, too late by the movement ground they can cover to then be able to get a heal off. And he gets over there and gets a heal off, but not in time. Delilah choked to death on her own vomit. What a way to go. That's a unique one. Pete's lost another character! Yay! Oh, Pete! Oh, Pete. You've done it again, mate. You've somehow managed to do it again, haven't you? And that's it, really. That's kind of where the session went up to. It was just this fight. However, the guy did drop a piece of paper out of his bracelet while fighting the two. And Karak eventually does spot it, and the smoke clears, and Zalkima's not there anymore, so he's disappeared. And the group think to themselves, he's probably going to pop up again when we least want it. So, anyway, he's wandering off trying to keep his intestines in. The way, and when you're facing 2 clothies like that at the back. And little do the group realise at this point that Costello has disappeared. He's no longer with them. And this all happens at around the same time that Karak decides to double-cross the mercenaries and say, that's my drinking money. Nah, forget it. And he starts attacking them. And Tanadul's like, you silly bugger. And that's in character as well. And it's like, what? It's our drinking money. Oh, all right. Tanadul's the kind of, you know, that will go along with it once it's been started now by Karak. So he goes in, and Blacktail goes in, and that was it. Ash wasn't helping. He didn't think it was right, double-crossing the mercs like that. Now, what I will say is I'm tracking the sort of karma readings of this group. I've got a percentage tracking down, which can be 0 at completely neutral, a plus figure if you happen to, your behaviour happens to have been very good, or into a minus if you've done really bad things like that, or as a player done something that's cheated to help you get further forward, like say mistakenly, we'll call it mistakenly, announcing that you've done too much damage, and then when you actually look back, then the player would have actually been able to put that out with certain thing in case, because they're explaining it wrong or whatever. So they actually would have had more. For instance, the person they were attacking might have had more armor against their attack, but the player didn't notify you. Things like that. All of that goes really bad against the player's karma as well, because it's kind of like that. You know, the player's dooming their character as well by those actions. They're buying sort of free power. You know, you can't buy power without some sort of consequences. So, and you know, all the things they've done before, like the summoning room of the God of the Unspeakable One, where they did the procedure and lit the candles and did everything, and the tentacle thing came out of the pit. And they're now initiates technically of the order. Fools. Right. Well, anyway, the meter is tracking. Luckily, Costello's in the pluses, and I think Ash isn't too bad either. I don't know. Give him time to be tainted. And all of this really did harm Karak and Tanadal's standing. They're the two with the really high percentages right now. And how's this going to affect the game? Well, I'm going to use these readings sometimes to determine, which are obviously they are resultant to change by the players and characters' actions. I'll determine sometimes if bad people might associate themselves to the bad members, or good to the good, or bad spot the good and hate them particularly more. There might be certain things that aggro the opposite alignment to them. So rather than picking an alignment D&D style, I like the thought that your alignment changes based on your actions, and effectively whatever percentage you are, plus, minus, or 0, affects what your alignment would be. Hey, just my thoughts. So, I mean, I could put a chart together at even, really, and an alignment chart for that purpose. But, yeah, I mean, by it being a score out of 100, plus or minus, you can even, again, get to D10s and run a percentile roll to check for things. It's another way of doing it. However you want, really. You could say, oh, is this going to screw them this time? Every time a certain thing happens, we do this. Okay, it's actually gone extra bad against you now because blah, blah, blah. But, the universe is watching, let's just say. Karak's done this, and it's really bad news. And a certain somebody just happens to have arrived in Freeport. And I did the first of these karma checks to see if that certain someone who keeps himself hidden in robes and has a glowing hot sword and seemingly a crown showing on his head, there's a real thing for wanting to kill members of this group. Do you know who I'm talking about? Starts with S. Yes. And bear in mind that Costello has suddenly disappeared. Will the group notice? That's the next thing. And that's where the session left off. Costello's not with them. They don't know why. Between you and me, here's why. It's because Squire has turned up, seen the reptile man, and thought, you're with them. I don't like you. You are unknown to me. I'll get you first. Jumps down, grabs him, hand round the mouth, drags him into the darkness, and puts a sword right up through him, and drops him in the shadows there, impales him through, and just leaves him on the floor to bleed out. Costello dying, and the group don't know he's there. What's going to happen next? Well, I'm going to stop the recording here, and I'll see you at the next video where you will get to find out. See you at the table.